Power sector, effective regulation, not regulatory burden. There are multiple institutions in the power sector with the same function, which is monitoring and regulation. We have NAPRA, we have CPPA, PAPCO, which is now PPMC. All of these are responsible for monitoring and regulating the management and operation of distribution companies. Likewise, we have PPIB, AEDB, NAPRA, apart from several provincial departments which have powers to directly and indirectly facilitate and regulate the private generation companies. Despite this administrative and regulatory burden of so many institutions, power sector challenges in the form of inefficiencies, institutional disconnections in the management, and the priority of issues are increasing. To strengthen energy function under the existing institutional setup will not lead to sustainable solutions. On the distribution side, by law, DISCOs are independent corporate entities with independent boards. Its operations and reforms are the responsibility of company management and the independent board. What to do next? By law, DISCOs are independent corporate entities with independent boards. Its operations and reforms are the responsibility of the company management and board. There is no need for any other institution like PPMC or CPPA to manage, monitor, or regulate the financial, commercial, and operational affairs. For regulation, we have an independent authority, NAPRA. The independent board guides the company management to develop a business model for the company and ensure the fulfillment of service standards set by the regulator, which is NAPRA. Similarly, on the generation side, it is the regulator's responsibility to allow the right combination between various energy sources after assessing their feasibility from all directions. It is for NAPRA to ensure the compliance of generators to technical and safety standards and not of PPIB or AEDB. It is also NAPRA's responsibility to create the right balance to promote net metering. Besides, we also have Board of Investment with relatively varied objectives and functions, and it can deal effectively with private investors in the energy sector as well. Power sector in Pakistan needs effective regulation and not a regulatory burden. A single power sector regulatory authority, which is NAPRA, with adequate and effective regulatory powers, itself monitored by the government, will send consistent signals to the company operators and overcome the issue of insufficient professional capacity. And it is for the government to ensure that NAPRA is performing effectively.
Pakistan Institute of Development Economics has explored various research questions surrounding foreign aid to Pakistan. Despite the country receiving a lot of aid in the past few decades, the country has not achieved rapid sustained economic growth and to this day remains dependent on foreign loans and aid. Our research explores a range of questions, starting from studying the complexities and constraints involved when it comes to foreign aid to Pakistan, politics of foreign aid to Pakistan, and to study the role of donors and development partners in trying to achieve collective development outcomes. Pakistan receives foreign aid and assistance from both bilateral and multilateral sources. This figure represents the main donors to Pakistan. Donors operate in Pakistan through both private and government channels. Which of the two modes that donor adopts is based on donors' own operating procedures and practices. Multilateral agencies such as the World Bank and Asian Development Bank largely work through government channels, whereas the bilateral agencies prefer to work through private channels or through a mix of both approaches. Overwhelmingly majority of aid disbursements are in form of concessional loans, which have to be paid back eventually. Data from the financial year 2019-2020 shows that multilateral donors disperse the most amount of aid to Pakistan, followed by commercial banks and bilateral donors respectively. At a more heterogeneous level, commercial banks account for the most loan proceeds, followed by Asian Development Bank, the World Bank, and so forth. Most of the loan proceeds are used for the purposes of budgetary support. Having said that, a significant amount is also used for financing of individual projects. Since most of the aid is in the form of loans, they need to be paid back on a periodic basis. External loan inflow has consistently over the past few years exceeded the external loan outflow, meaning that the external debt consistently continues to grow, making the country more dependent on foreign assistance. In the year 2018-2019, there were 34 bilateral donors and 33 multilateral donors which were managing more than 2,000 project activities in Pakistan. Despite receiving a significant amount of foreign aid, Pakistan has not achieved economic growth on a sustained basis and still highly dependent on foreign and institutional loans. PIDE research over the past few decades has addressed many questions pertaining to foreign aid to Pakistan. For instance, how aid and real GDP have a negative relationship. Furthermore, when one accounts for macroeconomic policies, the relationship between economic growth and aid is positive, but still remains statistically insignificant. An additional research study indicated that foreign aid has negative and significant effect on growth. It is domestic investment, export growth, and inflow of foreign direct investment, which are significant determinants of economic growth, and not foreign aid. PIDE has set up a foreign aid effectiveness unit. The objective of this unit is to systematically study foreign aid and donor landscape in Pakistan, build and maintain a repository of data, donor program activities, donor profiles, among other things. Furthermore, the unit will lead efforts to produce program evaluations and related academic research on foreign aid to Pakistan and study its effectiveness. Thank you.
Now we will talk about PIDE Sludge series. First of all, let me explain you what is sludge in the economy. Social scientists use the term sludge. Excessive or unjustified frictions are burdens that make it difficult for people to achieve what they want to or to do as they wish. These burdens or frictions make processes difficult to navigate. Examples of sludge include complicated paperwork, duplicated application forms, waiting in queues to get a task done, time consumed in seeking NOCs, and so on. Resultantly, all interactions between citizens and the state or service providing agencies create some cost due to these frictions. Therefore, in simple words, sludge is the administrative burdens borne by the citizens in the form of learning cost, psychological cost, and compliance cost during their interaction with government or service providing agencies. Here, learning cost indicates the cost that people encounter when they search for information about a service, while compliance cost reflects the cost related to compliance with rules and requirements. And finally, the psychological cost indicates the experience of stress, loss of autonomy, and stigma that comes from such encounters. It is important to examine the existence of sludge in every transaction because sludge imposes cost upon the economy in terms of waste of resources and opportunity cost incurred. Moreover, studies from behavioral economics shows that individuals have cognitive biases, which means individuals prefer to avoid these administrative burdens or sludge in present, even if it means foregoing long-term benefits. Due to these cognitive biases, the existence of sludge in transactions are consequential. This means the presence of sludge in the form of administrative burdens lower the frequency of transactions. Since GDP in one sense is the sum of transactions happened in the economy, therefore sludge also constrains GDP growth. To remove these cognitive biases, the policy design is critical. Here comes the role of institutions and their structures. For that, first we have to identify sludge involved in different activities. Pakistan Institute of Development Economics has taken this initiative of identifying sludge in different activities that involved an interaction between citizens and different government organizations. The sludge series initiated by PIDE ranges from getting a permit to construct a house or a high-rise building to getting pension dues from the government. These sludge reports record the direct cost involved, including learning cost, compliance cost, and psychological cost, as well as indirect cost associated with delays due to administrative burden. For instance, in case of getting a permission for a high-rise, our study indicates that it takes more than 4 years to get permission, and this permission requires more than 8 NOCs and certificates. The direct cost involved in getting high-rise permission is above 2 million. However, if we also consider indirect cost associated with this sludge, the cost runs over 89% of project value, and this whole activity is highly stressful activity. These reports also highlighted the area where sludge can be reduced. The reforms suggested in these reports can broadly be categorized into 3 sets. The first set is related to the steps where full elimination is possible, and the second set is related to the steps where partial elimination is possible. And finally, the third set based on the recommendations where digitization can help us. Reports come forward with a very strong point that digitization help us a lot to reduce sludge. and make transactions more transparent and efficient. For instance, in case of private hospital, digitization can reduce the permission time by 3 months, which accounts more than 40% time of existing sludge. With objective to highlight sludge and induce concerned agencies to work for reducing sludge in different activities, PIDE will keep working on producing different sludge reports. Stay tuned for reports on sludge and how to curb these sludge identified.
People mobility is an essential tool of urban planning and city development. इसको हम 4 तरीके से देखते हैं. Number 1 walkability, number 2 cycling, Number 3 public transport and number 4 cars. जहाँ तक walkability की का ताल्लुक है तो our cities are not designed to be walk friendly. In fact, they're not even friendly for bicycling of people. Instead, हमारा focus है roads पे, flyovers पे. We keep widening our roads, जिसकी वजह से हमारी even intra-city movement जो है उसमें कार की speed काफ़ी high होती है. We do not have proper pathways, we do not have proper cycling tracks, and hence people are not able to walk or bicycle even to shorter distance. जहाँ तक ताल्लुक है public transport का, हमने कुछ शहरों में बड़ी metro buses तो बना दी हैं, लेकिन एक efficient, effective public transport आज भी किसी भी शहर में हमें नहीं मिलता. Instead, we have forced people to restore to car ownership. But जहाँ तक बात आती है car ownership की, उसमें भी our industry is lagging far behind. If we see the trend of the last 5 years of local vehicle productions, we have not been able to produce even 1 million vehicles. Instead, our local vehicle production is on a downward trend during the past few years. इसको अगर हम मुख्तलिफ मुल्कों से comparison में देखें, so Pakistan has been producing vehicles much less than countries such as Morocco, Turkey and Brazil. And even if we see जो कोविड के साल में जो प्रोडक्शन हुई even in Morocco, that was higher than the vehicles produced in any year in Pakistan during the last 5 years. That shows how far behind we are lagging as compared to other automobile manufacturing countries. और इसकी वजह से क्या होता है? इसकी वजह से एक पाकिस्तान में unique phenomena है, that is regarding the own money in automobile industry. Own is a premium charge for express delivery of vehicles over and above the price of vehicle. Due to shortage of supply of automobiles in the market, people and different dealers in fact use this own money over and above the price of vehicle to promise express delivery of vehicles. During the last 5 years, हमारे consumers ने Pakistani rupees 150 to 170 billion have been paid as own money, and that has been due to the artificial shortage and the low local production in the automobile sector. तो इसका हल यही है, अगर हम एक हमारी सिटी प्लानिंग और हमारी अर्बन डेवलपमेंट लोगों के लिए पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट सिस्टम्स, लोगों के लिए वॉकेबिलिटी एंड साइकिलिंग अपॉर्चुनिटीज क्रिएट करें, एंड ऑल्सो वी फोकस ऑन रेगुलेटिंग अ कंज्यूमर फ्रेंडली ऑटोमोबाइल इंडस्ट्री. थैंक यू.
Based on research done at PIDE, global evidence and extensive consultations with experts from different fields, PIDE has come up with the PIDE Reform Agenda for Accelerated and Sustained Growth. The Growth Agenda has identified major constraints to growth and has suggested action points to spur growth in Pakistan. Given the current indicators such as debt-GDP ratio and youth bulge, PIDE estimates in PIDE Growth Agenda show that Pakistan's economy needs to grow at 7 to 9% to sustain debt and absorb the growing labor force. Worryingly, however, statistics and research at PIDE show that the major drivers of growth, namely investment and productivity growth, are on the decline. These two trends are reflected in the long-term decline of GDP growth. The PIDE Reform Agenda for Growth has identified several constraints and bottlenecks that have suppressed growth in Pakistan. One of these constraints is poor investment climate, which includes the absence of capacity to undertake transaction. One such example is that of recording fiasco. Inconsistencies in policies, deficient regulatory skills, and repressive institutions also hurt the investment climate. Another major constraint is the government's massive footprint. PIDE estimates show that the government's footprint amounts to approximately 67% of the economy. PIDE's research has also shown that overregulation constrains economic activity. Examples of overregulation include mandatory crushing laws in the sugar industry, banning 3D printers in Pakistan, and many other examples. Similarly, the role of institutions in economic growth is now well documented. For instance, one of the fundamental institutions that can facilitate or hinder economic growth is the institution of law. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, the legal framework is not conducive to growth. For example, it takes an average of 25 years to conclude litigation, which diverts resources and time away from growth enhancing
activities. Similarly, it must be understood that GDP is essentially the sum of transactions in an economy. The higher the number of transactions, the higher the GDP. However, in Pakistan, the cost of transaction is high due to over-regulations and government involvement in markets. Market forces work effectively if transactions happen in a frictionless environment. But higher transaction costs reduce the frequency of transaction and lead to suboptimal equilibrium or even market failure. Research at PIDE, titled the PIDE Sludge series, shows that in Pakistan, the cost of transaction is very high because of excessive regulations, documentation requirements, a huge number of steps to obtain NOC or license. All these factors contribute to dampening economic activity and hampering economic growth. For Pakistan to grow, we need to focus on the software and not the hardware. We need to come out of hug-hag mindset and focus on service delivery. For this, the PIDE growth agenda suggests rather than spending on PSTB projects, the focus should be on effective monitoring and evaluation and reserve-based management. What it means is that we must focus on the software development rather than creating low-value hardware through PSTB. Other important pillars of the software include an efficient civil service, a legal framework that is precise and simple, and independent regulatory bodies. The market is the place where economic activity and transactions take place. Therefore, the government's domination of markets through regulation or intervention must end. The focus should be on transaction-friendly governance framework to aid economic activities in the markets. The third action point that the PIDE growth agenda highlights is the role of cities. Research at PIDE and elsewhere amply demonstrates that cities are the engine of growth. Economic opportunities abound in cities, therefore the focus should be on building cities that are characterized by agglomeration, mixed-use urban spaces, and vertical expansion. The PIDE growth agenda also recognizes that openness is the key to growth. In Pakistan, tariffs and other taxes and imports are much higher than in other competing developing countries. Pakistan custom tariff regime is highly complex and has an anti-export bias. The solution to increasing openness is to reform and simplify custom tariffs to bring it at par with other competing developing countries. Duty concessions, SROs, and special schedules must be abolished. The custom tariffs must be revisited, including regulatory duties, and rationalized to encourage competitiveness and openness. In the current time and age, internet access is crucial for enhancing growth. In Pakistan, however, only a limited population enjoys the internet. The internet must be made widely and cheaply accessible, and fully funding fast internet access to all major cities should be explored as soon as possible. The sale of spectrum should be looked at as an internet access issue rather than revenue generation. Similarly, the achievement of 7 to 9 GDP growth will require more resources to raise the level of development spending to remove infrastructure constraint to growth. This will require the implementation of a strong and diverse agenda of tax reforms to substantially raise revenues. To begin with, a simpler and more transparent and friendly tax system should be adopted. Moreover, taxes should be made more progressive and remove the tax breaks and concessions to the upper income groups. Finally, a mechanism to check tax evasion and corruption should be established.
पाइड एनालिटिक्स नई पब्लिकेशन है पाइड की उसका जो पहला इशू है वो इन्फ्लेशन पे है वी हैव डन 4 थिंग्स फर्स्ट हमने फोरकास्ट दी है दूसरा हमने ये बताया कि इन्फ्लेशन की टाइप कौन सी होगी तीसरा हमने ये बताया कि इन्फ्लेशन के सोर्सेज कौन से हैं और चौथा हमने ये बताया है कि गवर्नमेंट या स्टेट बैंक ऑफ पाकिस्तान के पास कौन कौन सी चॉइसेस हैं ऑन फोरकास्ट साइड हमारा जो पाइड एनालिटिक्स है वो ये एनालिसिस कर रहा है कि हमारा जो फिस्कल ईयर 2022 है उसमें हमारा इन्फ्लेशन 10.0% से लेके 10.5% तक रहेगा और अगले साल जो अगला फिस्कल ईयर आएगा फिस्कल ईयर 20 दिसंबर 22 तक वो हम वहाँ पे तकरीबन 10 और 11.5% के दरमियान रहेंगे 2 बड़े काम हमने किए हैं फर्स्ट वी हैव डन दिस फोरकास्ट बाय द इकोनोमेट्रिक मॉडलिंग एंड सेकंड वी हैव टेकन द एक्सपर्ट्स ओपिनियन द सर्वे ऑफ द इंडस्ट्री एक्सपर्ट्स वी हैव डन इन दिस पार्ट तकरीबन 80% of the participants जिन्होंने रिस्पॉन्ड किया हमें दे आर प्रिडिक्टिंग दैट द इन्फ्लेशन विल बी अराउंड 9 to 11.5%. What is the nature and the type of the inflation? Our publication is predicting that the inflation will be the broad-based. एक बड़ा आजकल सुनने में आ रहा है कि इन्फ्लेशन सिर्फ फूड की वजह से आ रहा है बट वी हैव एस्टिमेटेड एंड वी हैव एनालाइज्ड दैट दिस इज़ नॉट ओनली फ्रॉम द फूड बट इट इज़ फ्रॉम द हाउस रेंट इट इज़ फ्रॉम द fuel prices and many other things along with the food prices. स्पेसिफिकली हमने तकरीबन 94 कमोडिटीज़ के ऊपर हमने रिसर्च की है और उसमें से हमने तकरीबन 70 आउट ऑफ 94 कमोडिटीज़ का जो पाथ है वो इन्फ्लेशनरी पाथ है. दैट्स वाई वी आर सेइंग दैट दिस इज़ अ ब्रॉड बेस्ड इन्फ्लेशन. एक और कंसर्न भी है कि इन्फ्लेशन सिर्फ सप्लाई साइड से आ रहा है, बट हमारी रिसर्च ये बता रही है कि ये सिर्फ सप्लाई साइड से नहीं आ रहा बल्कि ये डिमांड साइड से भी आ रहा है. उसके लिए हमने जो एक एस्टीमेट होता है या जो एक इंडिकेटर होता है मॉनेटरी ओवरहैंग का, वो हमने कैलकुलेट किया है. तो हमारी रिसर्च ये बता रही है कि जो मॉनेटरी ओवरहैंग की वजह से भी आपका इन्फ्लेशन डेवलप हो रहा है. इसलिए हम ये कह रहे हैं कि ये सिर्फ सप्लाई साइड से नहीं आ रहा बल्कि इट्स कमिंग फ्रॉम डिमांड साइड एज वेल. और ये ग्राउंड रियलिटी के बिल्कुल से मैच करती है कि ओवर द लास्ट 2 years कोविड सिचुएशन की वजह से लोगों ने के पास पैसा स्पेंड करने के लिए एवेन्यूज़ नहीं थे. दैट्स वाई अब वो पैसा निकल के बाहर आ रहा है, तो इसकी वजह से वो आपको डिमांड साइड से भी इन्फ्लेशन डेवलप हो रहा है. इस सारी सूरत हाल में गवर्नमेंट के पास या स्टेट बैंक ऑफ पाकिस्तान के पास क्या चॉइसेस हैं. वी आर थिंकिंग दैट देयर आर नो इजी टास्क फॉर द गवर्नमेंट एंड द SPP एज वेल. 3 बड़े काम फौरी तौर पे किए जा सकते हैं. एक कि आप इंटरेस्ट रेट को बढ़ा दें. If the state bank increase the interest rate, then definitely it will take a hit on the economic growth or the recovery path of the economic growth. कुछ जो इकोनॉमिस्ट हैं उनका ख्याल ये है कि इन्फ्लेशन डेवलप हो रहा है डिप्रिसिएशन की वजह से. अगर स्टेट बैंक ऑफ पाकिस्तान मार्केट में इंटरवीन करता है to stop the depreciation of the exchange rate, then definitely the state bank has to intervene with the foreign exchange reserves. तो हमारे पास इतने पैसे नहीं है कि हम उससे वो कर सकें. अगर ऑन द गवर्नमेंट अगर वो अपने टैक्सेस कम करती है या इंपोर्ट के ऊपर ड्यूटीज़ कम करती है तो डेफिनेटली गवर्नमेंट को भी अपने फिजिकल साइड के ऊपर कंप्रोमाइज़ करना पड़ेगा. तो एक इजी टास्क नहीं है इन्फ्लेशन को कंट्रोल करने के लिए. दैट्स व्हाई वी आर सेइंग दैट द इन्फ्लेशनरी प्रेशर आने वाले वक्तों में रहेगा. थैंक यू वेरी मच.
21st century is the century of digitalization. The movement to technology is rapid, but there have been a lot of hurdles in accepting the digitalization. But then COVID happened. Technology and digitalization were the solutions. The world became normal again. We are living in a new normal now. We have a lot of opportunities through the internet. When we were in the lockdown in the COVID, Zoom presentations, internet is providing a lot of opportunities. Most of those opportunities are realized in the corporate world. You can learn, you can get information, you can get your proper education and communicate and do employment based on internet, using internet technology. We at PIDE raised our voice at the time. We tried to start writing about the consumer issues, the issues of the population and the issues of the providers. We collaborated with major telecommunication providers. We collaborated and talked to the government and tried to come out with the solutions. We, in a study at PIDE, estimated that we require 967 million Pakistan rupees to provide internet to 4 districts of the 4 provinces. While talking to PTA, we have brought up the provider side issues, the supply side issues of the reach of spectrum and availability of spectrum, which PTA has assured that they'll be bringing in. So there will be enough internet for everybody around the country. We have talked to PTA to represent the agenda of PIDE to provide internet to everybody, because internet is now a necessity to tap opportunities, to earn, to learn and to get formal education.
There's a common belief in Pakistan that the civil servants are paid poorly. This study at PIDE, Cash Poor, Perk Rich, Civil Service Compensation, Incentives, Dissatisfaction and Cost, looked into the actual cost of civil servants to the state of Pakistan. This figure summarizes the compensation structure in Pakistan. The real issues are that there is a disconnect between pay and the reward a civil servant gets is not linked to his or her performance. There is a general lack of capacity and the perks are not available to all the cadres, but there are marginalized groups and there are privileged groups, and this leads to dissatisfaction among the civil servants. There is a quest for grades and perks in the civil service. Instead of performance, it's the race for perks that keeps them motivated. And there is inequality in distribution of these perks. As I said, this leads to dissatisfaction within the civil service. It's the current wage system in Pakistan. There are cash payments, including allowances, transports, medical house, ceilings, utilities. there are in-kind rewards, and then there are intangible rewards like board memberships, job security, social privilege, and the prestige that comes with being a civil servant. Then there are future expectations. The civil service provides the kind of security that other jobs in the private sector would not provide. And along with security, there are a lot of cash payments and in-kind and intangible benefits that are linked to the future expectations as well. It's mainly the allowances that increases the pay for the civil servants. Like for grade 17, it's 57% are allowances, and they increase to up to 73% when we reach grade 22. Allowances tip the balance, but it's the perks that tip it further. If you look at the perks that are received after grade 19, starting from grade 20, 21 to 22, they are more than 50% of the pay package of a civil servant. There is a belief that private sector pays more than the public sector. This may be true if we look at just at the monetary benefits. If we do a similar comparison internationally, again we see that the wage premium ratio for public sector employees in Pakistan is much more than as it is in other countries. What PIDE suggests is that we need to eliminate the unified pay scales, allow different professions and merit systems in the public sector, and there should be a wage setting system which should not happen through wage commissions but by linking pay with performance. And we think it's a win-win situation because all the valuable assets that right now are used by the government servants as non-monetary benefits would lead to growth and employment. More cash in hand would be available to the employees with better pensions and health care, and this would also lead to integration of the civil service with the markets.
The Research for Social Transformation and Advancement, RASTA, is the largest economic and social sciences research network in Pakistan. RASTA's mission is to develop a research culture and research network of academia and think tanks across Pakistan producing high quality evidence-based policy research to inform Pakistan's public policy process. Let's come to the objectives of RASTA. We have number of objectives which includes to reduce research policy gap in Pakistan by stimulating economic and social science research and debate across Pakistan, to build a network of thought communities stimulating internally defined and produced policy relevant research, to provide a knowledge platform where different actors can present, debate and share evidence-based research to inform decision making in the public sector, to revisit the future policy agenda in line with the evidence produced, and finally to build capacity and improve policy making and implementation by involving and engaging local universities, think tanks, policy makers, practitioners and other stakeholders. RASTA is guided by a Research Advisory Committee, RAC, chaired by the Vice Chancellor PIDE. The members of the RAC are well-reputed national and international researchers, academicians, practitioners, economic development scholars and senior federal and provincial government officials. RASTA has two broad streams through which it is building research networks, funding research projects and informing public policy in Pakistan. These include the RASTA Competitive Grant Program and the RASTA Demand Driven Research. CGP, this is the Competitive Grant Program, is the flagship program of RASTA. Research proposals are invited on specific themes and topics which are decided by the Research Advisory Committee. We announce call for research proposal biannually, once in March and other in October. Applications from all around Pakistan and abroad are invited through open competition. Anyone from across Pakistan and or abroad who are interested to conduct research on Pakistan's public policy issues, they are welcome to participate. So far in last two rounds, there have been 30 research projects which have been funded through RASTA worth 88.5 million. The DDR is a proactive evidence-based research approach to inform government's policy making process. The objective of DDR is to fulfill the demand for research. The objective is to fulfill the demand for research on several pertaining economic and public policy issues in the government, both federal and provincial level, highlighted by the government organizations, RAC members and experts at PIDE. Several interesting DDR research projects have been initiated. One of those projects is PIDE Citypedia. The PIDE Citypedia is the master key of information that provides comprehensive view of city economy, government, infrastructure, lifestyle, facilities and much more. In this project, PIDE is developing city profiles of 30 Tier 1 and Tier 2 cities in Pakistan. Funded through the Rasta DDR, the Citypedia will provide 360-degree view of the city, which will act as a tool to formulate informed policies at local, regional and national level. For more details about Rasta and opportunities Rasta is offering, visit our website and follow us on Twitter.
In Pakistan, the exchange rate policy has always tended toward overvaluation. State Bank continuously supporting the overvalued exchange rate at the cost of depleting foreign exchange reserves. Therefore, the prevailing nominal exchange rate does not reflecting the equilibrium exchange rate. Due to this intervention, in the last 30 years, we have faced 5 currency crises where we maintain an unrealistic exchange rate in the face of declining foreign exchange reserves, such as in 1993. Pakistani rupee was devalued by 10% at the cost of 31% declining foreign exchange reserves. In 1998, Pakistani rupee was devalued by 12% at the cost of 51% declining foreign exchange reserves. In 2008, to maintain the value of Pakistani rupee, we had lost 31% foreign exchange reserves. And the 5th currency crisis happened in 2019 when we fixed the rate and lost 10% foreign exchange reserves. We need to understand the exchange rate depreciation and don't need to fall in love with exchange rate parity. Recently, Pakistani rupee has depreciated against the US dollar around 10%. This is the natural response of the exchange rate parity to trade deficit, inflation and negative real interest rate. Now the question is, should State Bank of Pakistan save the exchange rate parity through foreign exchange reserve intervention? The answer is no, because the amount of foreign exchange reserve is not in the safe zone. It hardly covers the 3 months of imports. If State Bank of Pakistan intervene in the foreign exchange market by selling the dollars, the loss of foreign exchange reserves will lead to balance of payment crisis, depreciation of currency and compromise on the GDP growth. It is a misperception that depreciation of currency will lead to inflation. PIDE found no evidence of significant pass-through of rupee depreciation to consumer prices. In long run, exchange rate pass-through is around 15% and in short run it is only 2.6% and the total duration of exchange rate pass-through to consumer prices is 13 months. PIDE's suggestion is let the exchange rate be market determined and State Bank of Pakistan should not use the reserve to fix the value of exchange rate except to deal with very short-term disorderly conditions. Thank you.
Education for any society, nation or country can be regarded as a survival tool in contemporary times of ours. Few years down the road, when artificial intelligence and robotics would take over, the nations that are not being able to adapt to the changing patterns of the education would probably vanish from the human memory eventually. Having said that, for developing countries such as Pakistan to adjust to change on such a scale would be very hard. This is due to the fact that its education system is fundamentally flawed, let alone intertwining with the modern day educational standard. Let me take you on a brief journey to the best education systems of the world. Finland is the best to start with. Firstly, Finnish educational institutes are alien to the concept of homework. To them, it's an obsolete idea. Wonder why they have no homework, what is the rationale? Finnish educationists would tell you that the students should have more time to be kids, to be teenagers or to be youngsters, to enjoy the real essence of life. They are of the view that these students have a lot of other things to do within their life, being together, like being with their families, enjoying family time, like playing sports, music, reading, etc. Secondly, children in Finland only go to school for 20 hours a week, including an hour-long daily lunch break. The philosophy is that human brain needs to relax every now and then to function optimally. If you constantly work, then you actually stop learning any further. This way, Finnish children do better by going to school less. Likewise, in some of the European countries, education is free. It's illegal to set up a school and charge tuition fee. So, private schools do not exist at all, implying that rich parents have no option but to send their children to public schools. This compels rich parents to ensure that public schools are awesome. Moreover, by making the rich kids go to school with everyone else, they grow up with those other kids who belong to middle class or poor families as friends. Ever wonder why the French and French children in particular do not suffer from weight problems, obesity, diabetes and hypertension like their other counterparts across the globe? It all emerges from their primary school. Daily exercise in the form of 3 breaks, 2 15 minutes and one 60-minute break every day, and walking or biking to and from school is another factor that add to their health. The French believe that balanced diet is the key to healthy mind and healthy body. Then can students learn better, perform well in education and positively contribute to the development of their country. Now coming to Pakistan, we pay scant attention to improving what happens inside the classroom. We are focused instead on improving school facilities and school management, in part because these are easier and more visible than raising standards of teaching and learning inside classrooms. Therefore, for Pakistan to catch up with the European models of education, there is a long way to go. What we need to understand is take on all the aspects of reforms within the education system. It should not be going step by step, already too late for that. All things go hand in hand. The government should embark on the reform journey on all the facets at once, which may include the quality of teaching, learning environment, career counseling, availability of healthy food, uniform education system, regulating private education, promoting public education, setting up innovation centers in universities, linking the industry with education, and so on. This is the only way forward to the sustainable development based on equity.
Tax policy design and options for reforms. Our tax policy setting elusive tax to GDP targets and chasing it through arbitrary measures such as refund stoppage, advanced taxation and withholding taxation. Our tax policy does not follow principles of the fairness, certainty, efficiency and convenience. Our tax policy is complex and clean transaction in pursuing the tax targets. Current tax policy is more focusing on the revenue maximization rather growth and output maximization.
Evidence-based tax policy formulation requires us to not just produce analytical reports based on desk research, but we are also engaged in doing field research. For example, in the tax compliance side, we conducted a survey of Faisalabad merchants in one of their main bazaars, and it turned out that the federal taxation system is more cumbersome and time-taking in terms of compliance as compared to the provincial taxation. So what needs to be done is to review all the existing tax policy handles in terms of how the consumers or those on which these taxation policies are applied are actually responding. Because at the end of the day, we should let the businesses do business for their income generation and not make money out of working through tax policies for tax avoidance and tax evasion. That's our reform agenda, that we would like to bring out such a tax policy which is both growth friendly as well as revenue generating.
Based on these reform options, we have taken initiative and we are working on tax simplification, tax harmonization, and we also working on the performance of the regional taxation, and we also analyzing the under invoicing issue relevant to the imports and have taken initiative to review the tax expenditures in Pakistan. We also measuring the extent of the digital economy for provinces.
We at PIDE are not just producing published research, but we are also engaging with the number of stakeholders from taxation as well as the business, individuals and policymakers perspective. For example, we held a one-day workshop on how we can improve our tax policy. We have also picked up a number of issues such as the tax expenditure report, which was published by FPR. Besides this, our fiscal policy research unit is actively engaged with those which are making these tax policies. The objective is to produce evidence-based policy so that
the tax policy design can improve. Some of the highlights of the research which we produced for our tax reform proposal include suggestions for the withholding tax regimes in terms of reduction of redundant tax lines. It includes improvement or simplification of tax compliance measures. We have also talked about how the tax filing based on disincentive is a bad way of requiring the system to be documented, and other policy prescriptions were also made.